Overcoming hardships can be tough to do, but singer and songwriter Karen Hornsby made her way back to hope and healing through the power of music. She joins us with the backstory on her new release. Welcome to the Harvest Show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Wow, Karen, all I can say is you are a person of real Christian grit or godly grit. I don't know what to call it because you have such an amazing story. And we're going to talk about your self-titled CD, Karen Hornsby. But let's just even start with where that even comes from, that grit that you have through the stories that you have to share with us.
Well, I grew up in a home full of faith. I watched my mom and my dad move mountains. I'm telling you, they prayed and prayed, and they instilled that in me. I grew up under the pew of a church, and so so I just watched my parents and my family, and they just instilled that in me. And I have seen so many miracles from what they have been through that I knew and still know that God's capable of doing the impossible. So that's where it...
Okay, it's one thing, because I grew up in a Christian home too. It's one thing to grow up and live that and see that lived out in your parents, but there always comes a time where we have to walk it out.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I guess, I mean, the real true test of one test was the fact that you were in a terrible car crash, or... Yeah, tell me about that.
I hit the back end of a log trailer, and not sure how it happened or what was going on during that time, but hit the back end of a log trailer, and immediately the car caught on fire, and people were running for their lives, and thankfully a state trooper drove up on the accident and risked his life to pull me out, and of course he's one of my heroes today. And immediately when he pulls me out of the car, my car explodes.
Wow.
So he laid me on the side of the road, and matter of fact, they had to move me a couple of times because tar and debris was just going everywhere. So the Lord spared me from that. So that was kind of one of those, aha moments for me as well. So yeah.
Now, was that before you found out your husband had cancer?
That was before.
Okay.
Yeah, it was before I was married. Matter of fact, I was only 19.
Then you married your husband, going on with life, everything's great.
Right.
And he has cancer.
Yes. Then he has cancer, which was such a shock because my husband is such a perfect bill of health, you know, so it was so crazy that we had found out that he had cancer. And so they caught it kind of early, so they were able to do surgery and felt that he should have no more problems after that. But unfortunately, a year later, his ended up coming back, showing up in his lymph nodes. So yeah, he was diagnosed with cancer, and then I'm sure, you know, we'll transition into my daughter as well.
That's right. Okay, to add insult to injury, then you find out your daughter has cancer.
Right. So the timeline for that basically is in June of 2005, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And then in October of 2005, 4 short months later, we found out our daughter, who was 2 years old at the time, has brain cancer. So quite a thing to juggle and to have to go through, for sure.
But I'd imagine that out of that each situation, God was there for you.
Yes, absolutely.
And he gives us an avenue to share his goodness, and yours is through music. So now talk about, connect all of the dots for me.
Right, yeah, so when my husband was diagnosed with cancer, then my daughter was diagnosed with cancer. That wasn't, unfortunately, it. A year later, as I just said, my husband was re-diagnosed. It showed up in his lymph nodes. And then my daughter becomes symptomatic again, and so her cancer started growing again. So I'm like, finally, like, oh Lord, you know, what's going on? You know, I mean, you've cried and you cry and you feel like you have no tears left. And so finally, I just had to sit back one day and I said, God, I have seen you do one miracle after the other. Why have you not performed now? And so one day I was walking with our little girl who ultimately has had to have 5 rounds of chemotherapy, proton beam radiation. She's had 2 major brain surgeries, 3 major strokes, and all of this has left my daughter blind. She's now also unable to speak and has very limited mobility. So you finally have to reach a point and say, Lord, I know you can do this, so what are you up to? Because I mean, in the flesh, I can see no good coming out of any of this. So one day I was walking with my little girl in town, and when I was walking with her, something just, I feel like, just dropped in my spirit and said, pay attention to your little girl. And so I did. And so when I did, I just, more than I had before, noticed how she would just stop when I would stop, and she would walk when I would walk. When I call her name, she knew my voice. And when I take her by the hand, she knows it's my hand. And I just had an absolute crazy moment at that moment, and I felt like the Lord said, I just really want you to know me like she knows you. And I was just wowed at that moment. And matter of fact, I had to take a seat, and I thought, wow, I do want to be able to know your voice like nobody else's. I want to know when you're in the room. I want to go when you say go. I want to stop when you say stop. I want to know you on that intimate level. And he began to show me that there is purpose in all the suffering that you're going through, that nothing is in vain. He's walking with us. And of course, you think of Paul and you think of Job and all these people in the Bible. None of their suffering was in vain. There was a purpose for all of it. So
Let's talk about a few of the cuts. All things are possible.
Right.
What's that one about?
yeah, it pretty much says it, right?
Yeah, I
That
know,
no
right?
matter what you're going through, there's nothing impossible with God. It may not be answered the way you want it to be answered, but He's working something out for your good.
Now, how many CDs have you released?
This is it.
This is your your debut
My debut, yeah.
CD. Okay, Celebrate.
Celebrate, yeah, there's reasons to celebrate. You know, it's like the enemy wants to pull you down and makes you want to feel defeated, but I try my best to turn the tables on the enemy and say, you know, you really want to pull me down right now, but right now I'm actually going to celebrate because I know this is just going to further God's kingdom.
You know, Karen, so many people are watching today, they're in a bind or hardships and just going through so many difficult things, but you have a joy that comes from some place or someone, and it's not superficial. I mean, kind of talk about that. Talk about who that
You know what?
person
I'm a huge advocate that you also have to surround yourself with the right people.
is. Okay.
So, of course, there's some people out there that are Debbie Downers, as they say, you know, and you have to make sure that you're surrounding your people that will lift you up and be your errands when you're weak, because I can assure you, I may look strong today, but there has been many a time that I didn't even want to, there were moments that my mom had to snatch me up and say, go brush your teeth, go take a shower. I mean, it was that bad. You know, I mean, depression will try to take you over for sure. But thankfully, I surrounded myself and God surrounded me with some incredible people. And you just have to be determined. Am I going to let this beat me or am I going to beat it? I mean, it's a decision that you have to make. And I just am not going to let the enemy win. I'm just going to choose God and say, God, you show yourself in this situation. And I know you're doing something great. I can't see it. You say your ways confound the wise. I can't see any good, but you're bigger than me, and I know you've got something that you're up to.
And so you've kind of, you know, you take your focus off of your own problems and you help other people, which brings me to the point that you performed with Tim Tebow's, for Tim Tebow's Foundation.
Yeah.
Talk about your connection with them.
You know, we met Tim back in 2009 when my little girl was receiving proton beam radiation. And in Tim Tebow fashion, he stays connected with the kids that he meets, because as you know, he has a huge love for special needs children. So we've tried to keep that connection, and he actually made a few phone calls for me to help me with that CD that I was able to do. And then just because we've tried to stay connected and because I love obviously what he's doing for special needs children, you know, I said, hey, anything that I can do for you to help you with your calls, let me know. And so I was asked to perform at the Tim Tebow Not to Shine that they have it's a prom basically for special needs children. So I performed at the church in Jacksonville for that, and that was so fun.
And I'd imagine you performed some of your new music.
I did, yeah. I was able to perform some others, but yes, I was also able to perform that as well.
So what's the response been to your particular music?
It's been good. It's been good. And, you know, once people understand the story behind the music, you know, that always helps.
Yes.
When they understand what made this song, what birthed this song, it really does bring it to a whole new light and takes it to a whole new level. So the response has been really good, especially while I was on ABC. That was a really big response there as well.
Well, Karen, look into your camera and just encourage people, you know, to let them know that no matter what happens, God is there and He's in control of every situation.
Absolutely, I would love to. So, as you have already heard me say, there's always things that we're going to face. There's trials and tribulations that we're all going to walk through. But I believe with everything in me that all that we are facing, all that we're going through, is God developing your character to catch up to the calling that you have on your life. Don't give up. Don't give the enemy that. Don't let him have his way with you. realize there's purpose in all the suffering, and all this is setting you up for greatness. There are great things ahead for you, and the enemy would love to use it to bring you down, but use it as a stepping stone, and realize there's something big happening in my life right now, or the enemy would not be bringing this, and I'm going to use this situation to edify God. That's what God wants you to do, and I believe in you, and most of all, God believes in you, and I know that you can overcome.
Amen. Thank you so much, Karen, for those words of encouragement. To connect with Karen, go to KarenHornsby.com or go to harvest-tv.com for a link to her new project. It's self-titled Karen Hornsby. Harvest continues in just a moment.